What up, folks? What it do? Welcome to another episode of the Best Advice Ever podcast with your boy, Mike Goodwin, the bow tie comedian. Hopefully, you are enjoying this hump day, Wednesday, or whenever you decide to listen to the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we're going to start today's podcast with On the Road Again. So I just got back from I was in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. I was doing a keynote for the York Electric Co-op, basically for managers and for accountants, doing my leadership and laughter keynote, which I really enjoyed, which was about so my father's funeral was on Monday. I had this engagement on Thursday. Drove down, drove down to Charleston. But my mother got a little saucy with me on the phone, right? And it's very interesting. First time my mom has gotten a little saucy. So my mother called me. I'm kind of navigating my way to the venue. Got the GPS. I'm not particularly sure of where I'm going, so I'm really paying attention. My mother called me and we talked. And then I think when she calls me back, we talked a little bit. I said, hey, I'm trying to figure out how to get to where I'm going. Get off the phone. She calls me back. And I just was in the mindset of, man, we just lost my dad. And typically when my mom calls, something's not right. Like it's going to require me to do something. So my mom called. I think I'm trying to park, or I just parked. And I'm like, we just spoken. Somebody's died. I mean, that's the first thing I thought. And so when I answered the phone, I was like, Mama, who died? And she got a little offended, like, ain't nobody died. What you say that for? I said, well, Mama, every time you call me, something's not right. Somebody's died. Your car doesn't start. There's a critter in your house. The window's broken. There's always some bad thing has happened. I just thought somebody died because we just spoke a few minutes ago, and she was like, she pushed back. You don't be calling me. You don't be calling me. And I was like, I do call you, Mama. You don't be calling me either. If you calling me with bad stuff. So I'm like, Mama, why you calling? Well, I locked myself out the house. Mama, do you not see what I'm trying to communicate to you? So I did my event, and I think when I got back in the car, headed home, I called my mama back. I was like, hey, just call to check and see how you doing. She got a nice little laugh out of that. But it's very interesting that I communicated this to my mom. She didn't like to hear it. She clapped back. My mama clapped back like, you don't be calling me either. I'm like, hey, mama, I call you, but I don't have no rhyme or reason, no frequency. I check in and I see her because she works at our office, so I see. But she did not like me saying that. And that happened Thursday, and I think there's the other thing that happens with mom. I don't know if y'all do this. I really don't tell my mom where I'm going. Like, so when she called, she asked where I was headed, and I was like, to an event. And I don't know if it's because she's my mom and my whole life until I moved out, she asked questions that you had to answer. But when you become adult, you just like, hey, be easy. Be easy, lady. Now I don't do like she said. My brother tells her, he grown. I don't do that. I don't tell her I'm grown. I just avoid the question because a lot of times my mom is very interesting. I don't know where we're going with this information. Cause it'll be like, hey mom, she's like, where you out of town? I'm like, yeah, no. So she calls, she's like, you in town? I was like, no, ma'am. Where you at? Out of town. It's like, out of town where? Out of town, headed to an event, headed to a function. Where? Why, mama? Why? Because what's gonna typically happen? Let's say I say Charleston. Oh, Maybell live down in Charleston. You need to call. I'm not calling Maybell. You need to stop by Earl's house while you in Mama. This is a business trip, so I don't have a 100% reason why I don't, but I do think from the times I've said it, it's led to who lives where and me reaching out or calling or letting them know I'm in town. And I don't want to do that. I just no, I'm here for work. If I want to reach out, now there's sometimes I forget that people are where people are. So I do forget that, oh yeah, Maybell lives there. I'm gonna reach out. But for most part, if someone lives in a place that I'm going, I I remember it at some stage of my trip. And if I want to reach out, I reach out. It's very interesting. I'm starting to pay attention to how people navigate through life, and I'm not a Hollywood person. If I'm talking to you and I say I'm gonna call you or we need to get together, I truly mean that. If I say, yeah, man, hit me up, let's do some lunch, or sometimes they'll be like, hey, we need to get together for get our wives together and go out on a date. If I'm like, yeah, we need to do that, I really mean we need to do that. I'm not just blowing smoke, as some people would say. And if I'm not interested in that, I'll say that too. I'll say, yeah, my schedule's pretty packed. I doubt. I'll circle back around. I'll say it in a diplomatic manner, but I'm not gonna fake like, oh yeah, let's get together. I'm not getting together. It's like you're in the mall, you see somebody that you went to high school with, you ain't talked to this person in years. I'm talking about decades. You haven't talked to this person. Y'all catch up. You say, "What's up, man?" Blah, say, "Man, you look good. How's your family? Where you at? What you do all that? Hey, man, we need to exchange numbers, man, so we can link up." No, there's a reason why I haven't seen you in decades. There's no need to start linking up. This is not a link up situation. And I do get my little feelings hurt because I'm out here in these comedy streets and in these pastors appreciation streets and volunteer appreciation streets and date night streets, and I meet some cool people and people are like, hey man, let's stay connected. And I'm like, yeah, let's stay connected. And then let's say there's a situation with a couple of months from the point we met. I'm like, hey man, I'll be in town, and it's crickets. So I just feel like, hey man, if you initiate some type of let's stay connected, let's stay, and then when someone makes the effort to connect, you continue to be disconnected. I'm just like, what are we doing, man? Let's like enjoy the time that we have with each other, and then after that time's on, keep it moving. We gotta like have this unrealistic expectation that from this point forward we gotta stay in contact. It's very strange, it's very weird. It's very weird to do it with people that you've known, maybe grew up with, went to college with, were in the army with, some type of relationship like that. But it's very, very strange to do this with strangers. You meet somebody, they just happen to pick you up at the airport, take you to the hotel, take you to the venue. Y'all have some discussions. Maybe y'all go and grab some lunch, have dope conversation. Now, like, hey man, I want to stay connected. No, we're not. We're not gonna stay connected. So that was Thursday. Then Friday, I flew into Denver, but I was in a place, Littleton, Colorado, where I did an event for Project 127, and it basically assisting folks to become foster parents, to adopt children, and just doing some magnificent work as it relates as being the hands and feet of Jesus in the earth, and assisting folks that want to foster with children and assisting children to find families. And the thing I really thoroughly enjoyed, because it was a fundraiser and I did a set, they exceeded their goal for the night of the money they were trying to raise. But they were doing a lot of video and testimonials throughout the night. And what really blessed me was in the concept of sharing these stories about foster parents and these children that are being fostered or adopted. They talked about both the hard and the hope. And I found that to be very refreshing. Oftentimes, people just talk about the good side of things. They talk about the benefits, but they don't talk about the messy, nuanced, difficult challenge of bringing a stranger into your home and raising a child that's not your biological child, and unpacking the trauma that the child shows up to your home with. And so I really was grateful that they really communicated. Yeah, this is hard, but it also provides a tremendous amount of hope, tremendous amount of fulfillment, and a tremendous amount of ministry that extends beyond generations of families, and kind of reversing the curse that many folks have encountered through their family relationships and their bloodline. So I had a wonderful time in Denver, Colorado, Littleton. My cousin, my cousin Woody came through. Jerome, Jerome. You know, we got these nicknames. At the funeral, I shared my nickname, and now we got a couple of people in my church calling me by my nickname, and it doesn't bother me. Like, I don't care. I'm an adult man. But I don't know. I guess if I was, some younger version of myself would have been like, "Man, go ahead, man. Don't be calling me that, man." But now, like, yeah, that's my nickname. We good. So that's on the road. We was on this road, man. Something really funny happened on the flight going to Denver. The guy. So I'm sitting. I so I don't know your flight preference seating. I don't know your seating preference on flights. Number one, I'm a fly Delta. I'm a Delta flyer. Matter of fact, I fly Delta to the extent that I would drive an hour, maybe 2 hours, to take a Delta flight and maybe drive to the actual venue. Let's say a city. Now, I'm challenged by this because I think in January I have to fly either Southwest or American, because where I'm going, Delta's not an option. It's not even. I think it's like 4 hours away, so that's ridiculous. So I'm gonna fly one of the other carriers, but my preference is Delta. I prefer to have the aisle seat on the right side of the plane. I'll take aisle seat right or left, but my preference typically is the right side of the plane, just because I like to get in and to get out. The other preference, if I can't have the aisle seat, I'll do the window seat. Would prefer not to do the window seat, but prefer the aisle seat on the right side. Used to be the left side when I injured my Achilles, but I don't have any, like, it's not any pain or anything. I used to try to have to need it to be stretched out, but that's not a concern anymore. So the right side is probably my preference. But if I'm not able to do the aisle, I want to do the window. I don't like the middle. Is there anyone that likes the middle? I think my wife likes the middle when we fly, because we fly together. So she doesn't care about the aisle or the window. long as I'm on either side of her, she's just giddy, right? But that's my preference. I love to be in the on the aisle seat. Well, we're loading, we're boarding, and the person. So I'm sitting on the aisle, and the person in the window is in her seat, and a gentleman comes on the flight, and he goes and puts his bag up, but he's supposed to sit in the middle, but he goes beyond the seat, realizes he made a mistake, so now you got to fight back upstream, right? And so he finally gets to the seat. It was like, hey, I'm in the middle. I'm sorry. It's my first time flying. And so I was like, man, this is a grown. He wasn't young. He wasn't like a teenager. He wasn't even like a college student. He was an adult. I wouldn't say, I would say at least early, I would at least say mid-30s. He was like, man, I'm so sorry. This is first time flying. So I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting. And so people let him, get by. He got back into the seat. So when I sat down, I was like, man, this your first time flying? He's like, nah, I just say that when I do stupid stuff on the flight. It was a white dude. White dudes be doing stuff like that. The white boys. That's the white boy stuff right there, man. The guy was like, this is my first time flying. Like, white boys, man. That's some white boy stuff. Now, I maybe should have warned y'all because I know somebody's listening like, oh, he's talking about race. I don't like to be identified by my race. Why do we have to talk about race? Hey, man, I'm just saying, white boys be doing some very creative, interesting things. If I just make a mistake on a flight, I'm like, hey, man, I'm sorry. That's my seat right there. And I sit my butt down. I was like, hey, sorry, excuse me. First time flying. And it not be my first time flying. If I tell you it's my first time flying, it's literally my first time flying. But the way he said it and how I was just like, this seems a little bit suspicious. That when I say white boy stuff, I'm thinking like frat, like the Sigma Gamma Zamma Phi Pi My Pi. I can't Sigma Nu or yeah or a Kappa Alpha. Those shenanigans and antics by the standard fraternity guy that is of Caucasian persuasion. So that's kind of the hijinks that I'm thinking about when the guy's like, "Hey man, I'm sorry, this is my first time flying." I think about some frat stuff, some silly fraternity guy pranks and shenanigans, and that was from the mind of Mike. Now, for the moment we've all been waiting for, the best advice ever, man. Yes. This is something that I have recently understood, and I don't think anyone's ever said this to me, or I've heard it in the way that I'm about to communicate. And the best advice ever today is don't want an outcome for a person more than they want it for his or herself. Again, don't want an outcome for a person more than they want it for his or herself. For example, over the years, I've met folks that are like, man, Mike, I want to do stand up. I'm thinking about a person in particular that very talented individual, very charismatic, very engaging in their ability to communicate, and very funny, very humorous. This person is very talented in terms of just gifts and abilities, can sing, can act. It's just a total package. Well, this individual was like, "Hey, Mike, I want to do some stand up," and we I advised them. He did some sets, and I could see that, boy, if this guy really committed to doing this stand up, man, he'd kill it. He could rock it out. But there's gonna be a long investment. Like, you just don't show up on Friday and then all of a sudden you headlining on next Tuesday. That's not how comedy works. And I found myself wanting it more for this individual than they wanted for themselves. Like, hey man, you did you do an open mic? Hey man, did you contact old girl about this, about the opportunity to be on the show? Like, I'm pushing, and what I've noticed with people now, I'm not talking about your children. I think children are a protected community. I think that we should have high standards, and we should cultivate, groom, and parent them into their potential, their full potential. But I'm talking about maybe family members, people that we're in a relationship, folks that are definitely peers or of similar age, or may not be your same age, but you may be an older cousin, older brother, younger brother type scenario, and they need you just to be the family member. They don't need you to be the life coach. They don't need you to be the authoritarian. And I'm talking to myself as much as anybody. I was talking to a family member recently, and they communicate their appreciation that something I did, and they were so grateful for it. And I ended up saying, "Yeah, thanks, I appreciate that." And I said a few things, but one of the other things I said, I just want to see you be the best version of yourself. So that's where the rub comes in, because I want to see this person be the best version of themselves. But what if this person doesn't want to be the best version of themselves? Like, therein lies the problem. Now, I'm not saying that we don't inspire individuals to become who we see them to be, or communicate that in general. Just say, man, I really see the potential. I see you doing so much more. I see all the gifts and talents that you have. I'm a little disappointed that you've not taken advantage. I think we can do that, but I think that also is a level of like back up out of that. Like, just step away and be a brother, be a sister, be a friend, even in our spouses. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who was talking about how in some regards he's outgrown his spouse. And it's like, what, I'm supposed to throw my spouse away now that I've outgrown her in some degree, and she doesn't have any intention of wanting to grow at the same level, at the same pace that I'm growing. But now, do we throw people away? And so my advice is to not want outcomes more than the person that you're in relationship with, because what will happen is it'll strain the relationship. And you're trying to be encouraging, you're trying to be a resource, you're trying to be helpful, and you're being a nuisance. You're being a judge. You're being Simon Cowell of this person's life, and they don't want to perform for you. They just want you to be in relationship with them. They know that if they had a question, if they needed some help, they could come to you, but you so actively trying to drill sergeant them into their potential, into their greatness, into the best version of themselves, that y'all have estranged the relationships quietly. Because in those instances, in my experiences, folks just stop talking to you. Like, they just start backing away from you because they don't want to hear it. It's like, hey man, I just need you to be my brother right now. I don't need you to be my parole officer. So my advice for those of you that are in the earth navigating relationships, and that's all of us, don't want outcomes in other people's lives more than they want it for themselves. Like, it has to be internal. I just had a conversation with now again, children are different. I had a conversation with my son, and I'm trying to communicate to him, like, I need your language and your actions to line up. One of the biggest challenges in life, we say this, but we do that. I want to lose weight, but I'm at the all you can eat buffet. I want to be a better husband, but I don't treat my wife gently and kindly, and I'm not thoughtful about how I communicate in the house because I feel like I just got to be myself. What's vitally important is that what you say and what you do are very close together, as close as possible. And sometimes, I don't want to add more advice onto the advice, but sometimes we're saying too much. You talk too much. Oh boy, you never shut up. I said you talk too. Stop talking so much. But that's another podcast advice episode. That's not this podcast advice episode. This podcast advice episode is don't want outcomes more than the person. Don't want an outcome for someone else's life more than they want it for their own self. That's been the best advice ever podcast. And now, as we get to the end of the podcast, I want to share this. What you're not gonna do. So one of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit is the idea of clean comedy. And the idea, I think sometimes folks treat me as though I'm like on this missions field for clean comedy. I'm carrying the banner for clean or Christian or gospel. And I'm not. I'm really not. I'm just authentically being who I am. And that is a representation. And here's another idea around that. People will give you the conversation, or I'll get a conversation with people. Like Christian comedy's got clean comedy got to be so much harder. And I don't know if I talked about this, but comedy is hard. Comedy in and of itself is hard. So my analogy it's like comedy's a marathon. Running a marathon is difficult. I don't care what state you run it in, what time of the day, 26.3 miles, I think it is. I'm not sure about the point. I think it's 26.6 miles because I ran a half marathon. I think that's 13.3. But I may be incorrect. It may be. Let me ask my phone. Let's ask Siri. How many miles is a marathon? Woo! 26.22. That sounds like 26.2. I don't know where that other 22 came from. But running a marathon is hard. Doing stand-up comedy is hard. If you do it clean, I think you're just running a marathon with a jacket on. I think that's the difference. Like, comedy's hard. I'm not doing anything more difficult than the person that's using language. Comedy is hard. So there's no, I don't even think it's like a weight vest. It's just it's a little bit more uncomfortable. It's still hard, but it's not like I'm out here with armor on, right? And the other thing that people have this conversation sometimes tend to forget as it relates to me, I was raised watching entertainment that did not have language in it. I watched The Little Rascals, Three Stooges, Good Times, The Jeffersons. There might have been one cuss word. Looney Tunes. They don't even speak. The Roadrunner didn't even talk, and I laughed. It was meet me. Now it wasn't stand up, but it still produces laughter. Like I watch these things. I watch Gilligan's Island and Andy Griffith and all of this entertainment that folks were not using language. Fat Albert and the Cosby Show, and I laughed and I laughed and I laughed. So I don't think I'm doing something that's foreign. I don't think I'm doing this yeoman effort, this Herculean task of doing clean comedy. I'm doing clean comedy because it's an outshoot of who Mike Goodwin is. It's pretty consistent to how I navigate through life, how I communicate in general. I'm not in my house cussing my children. As a matter of fact, my father has used all the language for the Goodwin generations. Like if we didn't use another cuss word, foul word, we're covered. Like my father has extended our cussing warranty. Like it's so we don't have another good one has never has to say another blue vulgar offensive whatever however you choose cuss. That's what I'm from the South, so we say cuss words. Cuss, boy in here cussing. So yeah, you're not gonna hear me cussing. That's just not my stilo, which AKA for swag. Even when I even when I was I was big time cuss like in the 6th grade. That was my whole thing. When I was a young church kid, stayed in church, always in church, and then got to middle school, and boy, I got a hold of them cuss words, and so I was cussing it up. But I literally remember going to basic training and having like bets with other soldiers about not cussing. Like that whole little stretch. I was really in a relationship with God in basic because the chapel was the only time you could get away from the barracks. Be like, hey, sign me up. I'm going to church. Because if you stayed in the barracks, they gonna find something. Even though it's kind of quote unquote our day off on Sunday, they are gonna find something for you to do. So I'm going to church. I'm gonna get these little butter cookies and this juice. I'm listening to this man talk about God for 25 minutes. And I'm gonna try not to cuss. So God can smile his benevolent light upon me. But yeah, that's just not how I get down, folks. So thank y'all again. What you're not gonna do is think that it's impossible for someone to be entertaining without using language. And I am committed to my brand of comedy is refreshingly funny comedy. When you walk away from an experience with me, you feel a little bit lighter, a little bit more encouraged, and a little bit more inspired. Well, this has been the Best Advice Ever podcast. Thank y'all for tuning in to another episode. Do all the things like, subscribe, leave a comment. If you have any questions, you can email those at info at MikeGoodwin.com. Again, that's info at MikeGoodwin.com. ComedianMikeGoodwin.com. Let's get that correct. I'm sorry. Info at ComedianMikeGoodwin.com. Thank y'all again for checking in with me on the Best Advice Ever podcast. I'll see you next week. Same bat channel, same bat time. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with me, and I appreciate it. Peace.